Opponents of the Trumpcare bill have repeatedly hammered home some of what we believe will be the worst effects if the bill becomes a law. And so far, a lot of Republicans and conservative commentators are not happy about it. We're going to catch you up on some of the critiques of the bill. Let's see if you recognize these faces.
Medicaid is the program in this country that provides health insurance to 1 in 5 Americans, to 30 million kids, to nearly 2 out of every 3 people in a nursing home. These cuts are blood money. People will die. Let's be very clear. Senate Republicans are paying for tax cuts for the wealthy with American lives.
What the Republican proposal does is throw 23 million Americans off of health insurance. What a part of Harvard University and the scientists there determined is when you throw 23 million people off of health insurance, people with cancer, people with heart disease, people with diabetes, thousands of people will die. I wish I didn't have to say it. This is not me. This is study after study making this point. It is common sense. If you have cancer, and your insurance is taken away from you, there is a likelihood you will die, and certainly a likelihood that you will become much sicker than you are today. That's the facts.
So there you see Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. We've said much the same thing for a very long time here on the program. And we're gonna get back to the facts underlying those claims in just a little bit. But as I alluded to in the intro, Republicans don't like when you point out what their bill will do. And so it's led to website articles like this. If you could bring up the first one. Top Democrats say Americans will, quote, die from Obamacare overhaul. Bring up another one from the Daily Caller targeting Bernie Sanders. We're freaking out over the fact that 22 million will lose their health insurance. Finally, Newt Gingrich, Democrats lying to save Obamacare. And it hasn't stopped, so we also have Julie Banderas, anchor for Fox. You'll see her in this clip.
I want to first of all talk about what the Democrats have done, because they have scared the bejesus out of a lot of Americans and rural Americans, basically saying millions of people, tens of millions of people are going to lose their insurance. People are going to die. You know, I got the CBO report right here. It's 49 pages long, and I read it. I don't know if the American people have read it.
Sure.
But I want to tell you something that it says, because it talks about the millions of people that potentially will be uninsured under the GOP plan. And according to this, it is estimated that in 2018, 15 million more people would be uninsured under this legislation than under the current law. Primarily, and I want to emphasize that word primarily, because the penalty for not having insurance would be eliminated.
And at the same time, the subsidies that would make it affordable will also be eliminated. So she's going to focus on the part, obviously, that she likes. But we're being unfair by focusing on the deaths that are likely to result on the people who will be thrown off their health insurance.
First, let's note for the record that Banderas is a news anchor for Fox News. She's not an opinion host. She's like Hannity will say, hey, look, I do commentary at night. And I think that's actually fair. Now they've taken away fair and balanced. Okay, good. At least you're not lying anymore. It's a conservative news station, right? But they still pretend that their news anchors do straight news. And here she is like, oh my God, they're scaring those dastardly Democrats, scaring the bejesus out of people, saying that if you lose your health insurance, you might die. Of course you could. So, okay, other than common sense, let's begin to break it down. So part of their attack against Sanders, Warren, Democrats is, look at how uncivil that they're being. They're talking about people dying. You can't do that. You're getting people all riled up. Okay, look, if you're talking about free college, this is a super important issue, but there's no one's life on the line, generally speaking. So if you stretch that to people are dying, that's wrong, right? Okay, that's not the right way to go. And I can give you 1,000 obvious examples. But there are a couple of issues that the government deals with that are definitely, clearly life and death. Now, it doesn't mean that there is a right and wrong decision, and that's why we debate these things. And we have a strong opinion in one direction. But if you're talking about war, for example, and you say, well, because of that, people will die. Well, that's literally true.
You're being hysterical, man.
Right.
You're being hyperbolic.
So it's like those protesters for the Vietnam War. You say like, if we go to Vietnam, thousands will die. Oh, you're being hysterical. Like you're gonna go into the middle of the jungle and have a war and you think people are going to die? Of course, that's what happens in a war. And if you don't have health care and then you get sick, you have, like for example, cancer, will you die? yeah, that's kind of how cancer works.
Yeah. I think you might, in this case, be even being too fair to her, because look, she did focus on the claims about the deaths, but she also said that she didn't like that we were talking about all the people who would just lose the health insurance, regardless of whether they die or not, that we're pointing out that 22 million will lose their insurance. Well, it's not like Bernie Sanders wrote that report, the CBO wrote that report. And Donald Trump, in the section we were showing earlier, was like, these Democrats are making all these claims about the bill before they've even seen it. Yeah, we made correct predictions about what would be in the bill based on your past comments. And it's very similar to the House bill. The estimates of how many will lose their health insurance are almost identical. So we can talk about that at this point. But a lot of people are saying that it's not based on anything. It's just lies. Bernie Sanders is exaggerating. Elizabeth Warren exaggerating. So let's go over some of the evidence. PolitiFact looked into this, including reaching out to the Bernie Sanders campaign about the studies he talked about in the video you just saw. And one of them, by the Harvard Center for American Progress, projected an additional 217,000 deaths over the next decade, or 21,700 per year. The second piece of evidence estimated that there would be almost 44,000 deaths annually due to the GOP's health policy changes. And that initial estimate, by the way, was based off of a smaller number of people being thrown off their health insurance than the CBO has calculated. So it's actually going to be worse than that if you were to update it based on the new information. And they conclude saying, we found at least 7 academic papers that detected a link between securing health insurance and a decline in mortality, which sort of makes sense even without citations, but I'm glad that they have it. And furthermore, we found ample evidence in the academic literature to suggest that legislation on the scale of the House bill would produce, quote, thousands of additional deaths, which means that you can then claim that this will cause thousands of deaths.
And some of those studies looked into what happened when states didn't sign up for the Medicaid expansion, as compared to states who did. And there's a lot of ways to do those studies, and almost all of them came to the conclusion is, well, the people who didn't sign, the states that didn't sign up for Medicaid, X number of people didn't have insurance, and of those, a certain percentage got sick. And when they did, and it's not sick like I twisted my ankle and went to the emergency room, got sick with a condition that needs to be treated regularly. And they didn't get that treatment because they didn't have insurance, and yes, they in fact died.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how healthcare works. So is there a scenario in which people have less insurance, so more of them live? That makes no sense. How could they?
Medical malpractice, I guess.
So of course more people will die. So it's to say that it's, look, but PolitiFact, I both want to give them credit in this. Overall, I love what they do and that they exist, but they are also frustrating on some counts. So they look at the facts, wonderful. We love that part. We're not right-wingers, hate it when you look into facts. So we like it. We want you to look into facts even more, okay? Hold everybody accountable. And then when they mention that for the 2 Harvard professors cited by Bernie Sanders' staff when they inquired further were not peer-reviewed studies. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, that's a data point. Now, the right-wingers would dismiss that immediately, like peer-reviewed. Who cares? That's science anyway.
Well, they wouldn't understand what it means.
But. Yeah, but I would say that's an interesting and important data point. Now, here's the part that drives me crazy about PolitiFact. They have to be balanced because they can't always rule against Republicans. Otherwise, they have a liberal bias. Just give us the facts. So it turns out, by the way, on the peer-reviewed or not, those articles, the PolitiFact later says in a parentheses buried in the article, we're quoting studies that were peer-reviewed. Then don't say that in the beginning.
And 5 of the 7 were also themselves just peer-reviewed.
Yeah, and so now we have to PolitiFact. Okay, anyway.
Yeah, they're doing analysis based off of data that comes from studies that were peer-reviewed.
Yes, okay, fine. Let's put that nitpicking aside, if you want to call it nitpicking. At the end, their conclusion is what Bernie Sanders said is mostly true. No, you just told us that it was totally true. So even the 2 studies that they cited where it was equivocal evidence, they reached out to the authors and the authors said, no, the other studies are right. Probably thousands will die, right? No, I'm not sure that they confirmed that other thousands would die, but they confirmed the other studies. So they had no dissent. It's not mostly true. The only reason they call it mostly true is balance. I have to balance it. If I keep saying that liberals are completely true and right-wingers are making up stuff, I'll get accused of bias. So no, do your job. PolitiFact. According to the facts you gave in the article, Sanders' statement was not 99% true, it was 1 billion% true. Now, PolitiFact would look at that and go, there is no such thing as 1,000,000,000% true, so I'm gonna rate his statement mostly true.
I think you should start a website, it's PolitiFact Fact, where you fact checked each PolitiFact article. And then you evaluate how accurate they are. By the way, one last thing though, so you just saw Fox there saying like, oh, you're saying people are gonna die. That's irresponsible, even though the evidence is there that it's true. Do you remember, some of you are too young, do you remember when we were debating Obamacare in the first place, what right-wingers were saying about Obamacare and what it would do? They weren't pointing to peer-reviewed studies of how many people would die. They were saying freedom would die, America would die. There was a guy with a flag saying, if they're gonna kill America, they're gonna have to get through me. And that was played on Fox News. I don't know if he was peer-reviewed. I don't think they looked into it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We're parsing whether Bernie Sanders, backed up by almost every study, can be called mostly true or completely true. They made up things about death panels. Just made them up.
Yeah, and still say it.
And to this day say it, right? But everybody in the establishment press has to find some sort of balance.
Yeah.
PolitiFact. Don't worry about it. If you're a PolitiBalance, then maybe you should do this.
Yeah.
If you're PolitiFact, you should just look at the facts and call it like it is.
Exactly.
You don't like ads? I hear you, brother. You know how you can avoid ads for the Young Turks? Become a Young Turks member and get all the content ad-free. TYTnetwork.com/join.